Mark and Kelly Strong, both 33 years old, were on the adventure of a lifetime. With their 4 children, ages 2 to 8, they were driving their trusty family van from Seattle, Washington, all the way to Anchorage, Alaska. It was August 3rd, 1993, and excitement buzzed in the air as they traveled toward their new home. This trip was meant to be a memorable journey filled with laughter and bonding. As evening fell, they were still miles away from their destination. With the sun dipping below the horizon, the family decided to stop for a break. Around 10 p.m., they pulled off Highway 37 at the Meziadin Junction in British Columbia. They hoped to catch a little rest before continuing their long drive. After a quick snack, everyone settled in for a well-deserved sleep, completely unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. Mark awoke suddenly to an unsettling silence. He glanced at the clock and saw they had been asleep for about 2 hours. The van was dark, but he could see the outlines of his children in their seats. What was that noise? He wondered aloud. He felt a chill creeping down his spine. "Where's Mikey?" he asked Kelly, who was still half asleep beside him. Kelly stirred, rubbing her eyes. "He's probably just under the seat," she suggested, yawning. She climbed into the back to check on their youngest son, Mikey. As Mark leaned back, a sense of unease settled over him. He suddenly heard a muffled voice. "Mark, help me!" Kelly's voice pierced through the stillness. Panic gripped him as he bolted upright, heart racing. "What?" he yelled, turning to look out the window. He could see Kelly outside, her face pale with fear, pounding on the glass. "Let me in! Let me in!" she shouted, but before he could react, she vanished into the darkness. "What the hell is going on?" Mark gasped, adrenaline surging through his veins. He felt an inexplicable force wrapping around him, and in an instant, he was outside, lying on the cold ground. Confused and terrified, Mark lay still for a moment, trying to gather his thoughts. He pushed himself up, glancing around. He was in the middle of a dense forest. A few hundred yards ahead, a flickering light caught his eye. "My family," he thought desperately, remembering his kids. He started moving toward the light, but the uneven ground made it difficult. As he got closer, he heard a chilling scream. "Daddy, help me! It's got me!" It sounded like Rachel, his little girl. Panic surged as he quickened his pace, pushing through the thick underbrush. He reached the top of a small hill and saw their van in the distance, doors still closed, but the light was coming from the gas station nearby. Then he noticed something off to the right, just beyond the hill's edge. Something was moving, holding Rachel in its grasp. Fear coursed through him. He dashed down the hill to check on Charlotte and Sophie, his other daughters. Peering through the window, he saw them huddled together, scared but safe. Relief washed over him, but the absence of Mikey and Rachel sent his heart plummeting. Without thinking, he bolted back toward the direction of the creature he had seen with Rachel. The panic in his chest overshadowed the instinct to call the authorities. He scrambled up the hill, his heart racing. As he reached the top, he faced the dark forest again, trembling. But he had no time to hesitate. Rachel needed him. "Rachel, where are you?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. He listened, straining to hear any sound that might guide him, but all he heard was the rustling of leaves and the whisper of the wind. "I'm coming," he called out again, fear clawing at his throat. He pushed through the trees, desperately searching. "Rachel," he shouted, but the forest seemed to swallow his words. It felt like hours had passed as he stumbled through the darkness. He would walk a short distance, then stop to listen, but there was only silence. He glanced back frequently, hoping to see the faint glow of the gas station, reminding him he wasn't completely lost. After what felt like 30 minutes of wandering, the reality of the situation began to settle in. The darkness was suffocating, and dread filled his heart. "I need to go back," he thought, the weight of fear heavy on his shoulders. Reluctantly, he turned around and headed back to the van, hoping Charlotte and Sophie were still safe. As he approached the top of the hill again, a thick fog began to roll in. It obscured his view of the gas station, making it difficult to see anything. "I can't lose them too," he murmured to himself, urgency pushing him forward. When he reached the van, he pulled open the sliding door, and Charlotte and Sophie screamed. "Daddy, what's happening? Where's Mommy?" Sophie cried, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know, sweetie. Someone took Mommy along with Mikey and Rachel," he said, trying to sound brave for them. "I'll try to call the police from the payphone over there. Stay here and don't get out, okay?" They nodded, their faces pale. Mark felt a wave of sadness wash over him as he quietly cried, knowing he needed to find his family. The fog thickened around him as he made his way to the payphone attached to the gas station. When he reached it and picked up the receiver, his heart sank. The cord had been ripped out, dangling uselessly. "Damn it," he yelled in frustration, slamming the receiver back down. As he turned to head back to the van, he heard a sound of faint pitter-patter, like bare feet running across the asphalt. "Who's there?" he called, dread pooling in his stomach. Panic surged again as thoughts of his daughters raced through his mind. He hurried back, knowing he had to protect them. When he reached the van and reached for the door, he suddenly felt a rush of air behind him. Before he could turn around, something collided with him, sending him crashing to the ground. Stars swirled in his vision as darkness closed in. When Mark finally opened his eyes, he found himself staring at the night sky, but something felt off. He sat up slowly, the air around him heavy with an unrecognizable feeling. Everything around him was a dull gray, unlike the vibrant colors he remembered. Our van was supposed to be turquoise blue, he thought, confusion flooding his mind. What is happening? He rubbed his eyes, convinced he must have hit his head too hard. But when he opened them again, the van remained that dull gray color. The fog had lifted, but a thick cloud of dread hung over him. "This can't be real," he whispered, panic creeping back. He scanned the area, but everything looked eerily different. Mark pushed himself to his feet, determination flooding his veins. "I have to find my family," he thought fiercely. He stumbled forward, trying to make sense of this strange reality. As he moved, he realized he was still near the gas station, but the light flickering above was now just a ghostly glow. "Kelly, Rachel, Mikey," he shouted, his voice echoing through the eerie quiet. No answer came, just the unsettling rustle of leaves. He felt a wave of hopelessness wash over him. He turned to head back to the van, heart pounding in his chest. Suddenly, he heard a faint whisper, barely audible but chilling. "Daddy." It was Rachel's voice, but it sounded distant and hollow. He spun around, heart racing, searching for the source. "Rachel," he shouted, feeling the terror build within him. He moved cautiously, following the sound, the gray forest swallowing him up. "I'm coming," he yelled, desperation fueling his steps. But the farther he went, the weaker the voice became, fading into the whispers of the trees. As he walked, shadows danced in his peripheral vision, making him jump. The forest seemed alive, but not in a good way. "This isn't real. It can't be," he murmured, trying to convince himself. Then he heard laughter light, innocent giggles that sent a chill down his spine. He followed the sound, each step more hesitant than the last. "Rachel, is that you?" he called, hoping against hope. The laughter grew louder, but it was no longer just Rachel's. It sounded like all his children, echoing through the fog. The trees around him twisted and turned, creating a maze that felt both familiar and foreign. This isn't right, he thought, fear creeping back in. Finally, he stumbled upon a small clearing, the laughter fading to silence. In the middle stood a figure, cloaked in shadow. Mark felt his heart drop. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice trembling. The figure slowly turned, and Mark felt a jolt of recognition. It looked like Kelly, but something was terribly wrong. Her eyes were vacant, and her expression was eerily calm. "Mark," she said, her voice soft and haunting. "Join us." "Where's the kids? Where's Rachel?" he cried, stepping back in fear. "Rachel is safe," she replied, but her voice felt hollow. "We're all safe here." "Safe," Mark echoed, feeling a surge of anger. "You're not my wife. Where are my kids?" The figure smiled, but it sent chills down his spine. "They're playing, Mark. You can join them if you let go." Mark shook his head, realizing he was losing himself in this nightmare. "No, I will find my family," he shouted, his voice breaking. He turned and ran, sprinting back through the twisted trees, the laughter of his children echoing around him. "Rachel! Charlotte! Sophie!" he called, desperation filling his voice. The forest closed in around him, the shadows growing darker, the laughter growing louder. He stumbled into a clearing, panting heavily. In the distance, he saw a flicker of light. Was it the gas station? He had to reach it. As he sprinted toward the light, he felt something grab his ankle, pulling him down. He fell to the ground, panic flooding him. "No!" he screamed, struggling against whatever had a hold of him. "I need to find them." With one last surge of strength, he broke free and pushed himself up. He could see the gas station now, a beacon of hope in the dark forest. He ran, heart racing, but the laughter grew louder, echoing in his ears. "Daddy, help me!" Rachel's voice rang out again, and he felt a surge of determination. When he finally reached the gas station, he threw himself against the door, gasping for breath. He stumbled inside, looking for anyone who could help. But the station was empty, the lights flickering ominously. He spotted the payphone again, but it was still useless. "Please, someone help me!" he yelled, but his voice echoed in the silence. He felt the weight of despair settle over him as he sank to the ground, tears streaming down his face. Just then, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, hope igniting in his chest. "Is someone there?" he called out. But as the figure stepped into the light, his heart sank again. It was Kelly, her face devoid of emotion, standing with Mikey and Rachel beside her. "Mark," she said softly, "you should have joined us." "No, this isn't real. You're not my family," he screamed, backing away. Mark turned to run, but the darkness closed in around him. The laughter returned, and he felt the pull of the forest, trying to drag him back into its depths. "I won't let you take me," he shouted defiantly, pushing through the shadows. With every ounce of strength he had left, he ran toward the gas station's exit. "I have to find my girls," he thought, fighting against the oppressive darkness. Just as he reached the door, the laughter grew louder, almost deafening. He burst outside, heart pounding, ready to face whatever horrors awaited him. But the forest was still, eerily silent. "Charlotte! Sophie!" he called, his voice breaking. But all he heard was the wind rustling through the trees. "No, please, don't let this be happening." Then he saw a flicker of light in the distance, a spark of hope. He sprinted toward it, praying it would lead him back to his family. As he ran, the shadows behind him shifted and twisted, whispering dark secrets in his ears. Finally, he reached the light, and it was a clearing filled with stars. But something felt off. He looked around, breathless, searching for a sign of his family. And there, at the edge of the clearing, he saw them, Charlotte and Sophie, playing in the moonlight. "Daddy," they called, their voices filled with joy. "Girls," he shouted, relief flooding him. He ran toward them, but as he got closer, he noticed their faces were pale and their eyes hollow. "What happened?" he cried, panic rising again. "Join us, Daddy," they said in unison, their voices echoing in the silence. "No," he yelled, shaking his head. "I won't let this happen." With all his strength, he broke free from the dark forest's grasp. He sprinted back toward the gas station, the light flickering in the distance. "I have to get out of here," he thought, fear fueling his every step. Just as he reached the gas station door, he turned to look back. The forest was alive with shadows, the laughter echoing through the night. But he refused to give in. He threw himself inside, locking the door behind him. He sank to the floor, gasping for breath. "I'm safe," he thought, but the laughter grew louder outside. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging him into darkness. He felt a cold breeze sweep through the station, sending chills down his spine. "No, this can't be happening." As he huddled in the dark, the whispers surrounded him. "Join us, Mark. It's safer here." Mark closed his eyes, fighting against the panic. "I have to stay strong. I have to find my family," he thought fiercely. But as the laughter echoed around him, he felt himself slipping away, trapped in the darkness of the forest. "I won't give up," he shouted into the void, determination blazing in his heart. In that moment, he felt a flicker of hope. "I will find them. I will escape this nightmare," he promised himself, ready to fight for his family and reclaim the life he once knew. I whispered to myself, trying to calm my racing heart. My thoughts quickly shifted back to my girls. Charlotte and Sophie should still be in the van. Panic surged as I dashed up to the window and peered inside. I cried out and pounded my fist against the glass. No, the van was empty. "Charlotte, Sophie, where are you?" I screamed, my voice echoing in the stillness. Then it struck me my voice didn't sound real, like it was lost in the void. Everything around me felt silent, and I couldn't tell if I was shouting or if the words were just swirling in my mind. Suddenly, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Daddy, help us!" It was Charlotte. My heart raced as I yelled back, but my voice felt empty, like a hollow echo. "Daddy, it's got us! Please help us!" she cried again. I searched frantically for her, but I couldn't pinpoint where the sound was coming from. It was the strangest thing. Instead of standing there frozen, I started running around, desperate to find them. As I rushed to the back of the gas station, something flickered in my peripheral vision, causing me to halt abruptly. I swear I saw a pair of red eyes staring at me from the edge of the trees. But when I turned to look directly at them, nothing was there. "This can't be happening. This can't be real," I thought, panic coursing through my veins. I continued running until I made my way back to the van, hoping the girls might have returned. But it was still empty. My heart sank as I closed my eyes, feeling mentally exhausted. I leaned my head against the van's window, trying to collect my thoughts. When I opened my eyes again, something inside the van made me jump. There, glaring at me from the shadows, was what appeared to be a man, but his mouth and eyes were strangely sideways. My heart raced as I shouted, "Hey!" and dashed around to the sliding door. I flung it open, but the van was empty, save for the things we had packed. I climbed inside, sat down, and closed the door, staring at Mikey's empty car seat. "Where is my family?" I whispered, feeling an overwhelming emptiness wash over me, as if my soul had been ripped away. Just then, something smashed the windshield, and the van shook violently. I gripped the passenger seat in front of me, holding on tight as everything inside was thrown around. Suddenly, something hard hit me in the face, breaking my nose. I gasped in pain, but before I could react further, everything went still. It was eerily calm, as if nothing had happened. I was about to open the sliding door to escape when something slammed against the window to my left. My hand froze on the handle, and I trembled, debating whether or not to turn around. Whatever it was, I could hear its heavy breathing against the glass. Slowly, I turned around, catching just a glimpse of it as it darted away into the shadows. I was sure it was the same thing I had seen inside the van. In a panic, I locked all the doors, knowing it wouldn't matter much against something so unnatural. My thoughts shifted from finding my family to just surviving this nightmare. I sat there, drenched in sweat, scanning the area for any signs of the creature. Then, just like before, I felt something wrap around me, and in an instant, I was lying down in a dark part of the forest. I jolted awake, fully expecting the thing to be there, but it was quiet. The first light of dawn was breaking, illuminating my surroundings. I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Should I wait for full daylight or try to find my way back? After about 30 minutes, with the light growing stronger, I decided to head east, hoping I would find the highway. After walking for what felt like hours, I finally reached a large lake, which I later learned was Meziadin Lake. I spent the night there, scared and alone. The next morning, I walked around the lake until I finally found the highway and managed to hitch a ride back to the junction. When I arrived back at the junction, I found the Canadian police were already there, conducting a search for my girls. They took me into custody for questioning, and my heart raced with fear. A day later, I learned that Kelly had been found by some hunters, wandering through the forest about 20 miles away from the junction. Her story mirrored mine. She felt something wrap around her and suddenly found herself in the woods, unsure of where to go. She just kept walking until she was finally rescued. The police brought in members of the Encot tribe, who had trained dogs to help search for the missing children. Over the next several weeks, they discovered the mutilated bodies of 4 children, each found 5 miles apart. When pinned on a map, they formed a perfect square. A week after the children's bodies were discovered, a 66-year-old man named Billy Goonan, a native who had assisted in the search, came to the police station to speak with me. He was allowed to talk with me, and our conversation was recorded. "Tell me what happened," he asked, his voice steady. As I recounted my story, Billy listened intently. When I finished, he said, "What you encountered is what my people call Anajar. It's an evil shape-shifting creature that steals children and can slip between realms. When it appears human, its mouth and eyes are sideways. It sounds like you entered its realm and somehow returned." Growing up, I had heard terrifying stories of my people who vanished into that realm and never came back. Yet somehow, I had survived. Kelly and I were held for over 2 months, suspected of murdering our children. But with no evidence against us, we were eventually released. We moved to Anchorage, seeking a fresh start, but the memories haunted us. We lived quietly, avoiding conversations about that dreadful night. As I lay in bed at night, I often wondered about Charlotte and Sophie. Would I ever know what truly happened? Would I ever feel whole again? All I knew was that whatever we faced that night was beyond anything I could ever explain. For more terrifying horror stories, please subscribe.